Hey, you're listening to DY Sensei, where we want to keep you healthy and happy. This month we're talking more about relationships. Yay! Now, we're going to be talking more about what makes good relationships and how you can build those up. Now, it's really hard to have a relationship that lasts, but if you have one, well, it feels amazing. We hear all the time from people about how they want to get into the perfect relationship and this and that. But the reality is more than that, of course. You don't get into a good relationship. Like, sure, you might start a good relationship, but it can go sour. For real good and lasting relationships, though, it doesn't come from clicking with somebody. It takes real efforts. Constant efforts, and that's what makes those sort of relationships difficult, but at the same time very rewarding. Now, talking about relationships, I remember a tragically sad relationship between two people who were very close to me. Now, this couple was very close to me, and unfortunately, the mismatch in their love and misunderstanding of what makes love last brought a sad end to the relationship. I'm just going to name them Jace and Carol to keep them anonymous. You see, Jace and Carol met online and started a relationship that lasted for almost 5 years. When it first began, both were willing to listen to each other. Jace at that time was going through some really tough times. He was feeling rejected and resentful with his family, but Carol was somebody who was there to listen to him and brought him out of his own turmoil. And because of that, he was able to forgive his family and grow closer to them because of her. Now for Carol, she had gone through many bad relationships before, with her exes cheating on her, and so she had become somebody who was more fearful of an unfaithful partner. The thing is, Jace was a very loyal person. He greatly valued commitments and cared dearly for her. Now, with a great start to the relationship, they spent lots of time together, from watching TV, playing video games, board games, you name it. They would go out on dates and do a lot of home cooking together. It seemed like they were really much the perfect married couple. And there seemed almost no doubts that there's a lot of intimacy and precious memories built over 5 years. They probably did have a lot of passion for each other, but with time, of course, passion starts to die down. It's natural for this to happen. But for Carol, who always wanted the picture-perfect romantic relationship, she grew more dissatisfied with the relationship. Why weren't we going on weekly dates? Why wasn't she getting flowers every month? Why doesn't Jace express his feelings and love like before? Well, even worse, when Jace moved into new house, the friendly neighbor, a single mom, became a perceived threat. She was afraid that Jace would cheat on her like her exes. How could she not be afraid? The neighbor was pretty, she was super friendly and always gave gifts to Jace, and she seemed to share a lot of common interests with him. Now, I should also mention that it seemed like Carol was also deeply infatuated with Jace. You see, to Carol, Jace looked like her favorite K-pop star. Jace was her K-pop oppa. For those who don't know what oppa is, it's a Korean word meaning older brother, but used by younger girls in kind of a flirty way, like how some girls might call their older men daddy. In lots of ways, she was also pretty insecure about herself and her relationships. That she would also constantly need that reassurance from Jace. They needed to text each other every day, and within 2 hours of each other's last messages. Every night, Jace had to wish her a good night, or else she'll be throwing a tantrum the next morning. And well, seeing how partners from the girls in her group of friends were very romantic, she was growing even more dissatisfied with her relationship. Jace was more of a rational, logical sort of guy than the feeling and deeply romantic type. And that isn't to say that Jace wouldn't do special stuff with her, or even give her nice gifts. He just didn't shower her with all that affection like the other guys in their friend group. For Jace, everything seemed fine because they seemed to get along with many fun activities. And what he valued most was, well, peace and the chill life together. Compared to the other guys in their group of friends, he wasn't that deep of a romantic. But he was also not as toxic as those other guys, too. Those other guys would be either controlling, manipulative, aloof, or, those boys, right? Who value faithfulness and loyalty less. Over time, Carol became even more anxious about their relationship. She became very possessive and began throwing temper tantrums over even the smallest things. Like not being offered to walk under the same umbrella under the rain, or being having a chair pulled out for her. She didn't want him to see or talk to that neighbor. And, well, she felt really distressed about it. When she felt distressed about it, Jace needed to reassure her instead of providing that rationale for his commitment to her. It even got to the point where she began to feel jealous about Jace hanging out with his brother or even talking to his brother's girlfriend. Eventually, things broke down between them because Jace couldn't handle all the negativity and possessiveness. Carol wanted more passion than intimacy, and she didn't want to be treated like the best friend. It's sad, and there's no doubts they were there for each other, but the unrealistic expectations Carol had for Jace had really brought ruin to their relationship. Now, this isn't to say it's all Carol's fault, of course. I believe that sometimes people are misled by unrealistic fantasies and expectations for their partners. And, well, what she experienced is what we call limerence. Limerence is when a person is in an extreme state of infatuation and obsession with the other person. It usually involves very strong feelings like possessiveness, the need for reassurance, reciprocation of feelings, and, well, sometimes they might even fantasize about a very beautifully romantic but unrealistic expectations and, well, relationship too, and try to project it onto their partner. Well, Carol, unfortunately, was in a state of limerence, and it created a lot of tension in their relationship. The constant obsession with Jace, like the need to chat every hour by text, or even the nightly goodnight text, was unrealistic and can be very demanding on a person. The desire to socially isolate her partner from perceived threats made her become even more controlling and seemingly manipulative, right? Also, there's that desire to have Jace as something like a white knight in shining armor. Showering her with love and affection constantly is just unrealistic. It's not all her faults, though. Like I said before, I believe our social circles can influence us into limerence, and even worse is the media we consume. Books, movies, TV shows like K-dramas, and all those sorts of things. Western pop culture, music about love, romance, toxic relationships, all add more to that fantasy of a super romantic and unrealistic relationship. Well, and until we realize this and separates our real life relationships from those that we see in media, it'll be hard to have a truly good relationship. Now, that isn't to say romanticism isn't great. We all need a little bit of spice in our life. But it's about maintaining a good and realistic balance of romanticism. Somebody giving you flowers every day and telling you they love you every hour doesn't have the same impact as when you receive it on a special occasion or a random, here and there's. And, well, as humans, we have a tendency to adapt to constant stimulus, what we call sensory adaptation in psychology. And I believe this can happen to us with all 5 languages of love. Like, words of affirmation, quality time, physical touch, acts of service, and receiving gifts. Now, sensory adaptation in psychology actually means when our brain becomes less sensitive to a constant stimulus over time. Imagine when you first put on your t-shirt. You feel it, right? Well, after you've got it on, your brain's going to turn that off, and you're not going to feel that you've got the shirt on the whole rest of the day, right? Our brains are actually better developed in detecting changes. Imagine when you're looking at a still scenery. The thing that catches your attention the fastest is when you see something move. That's why we want to avoid constant bombardments of love and affection. It can make us numb to it, and we start taking those things for granted. Now, there's always the other problem of needing that dopamine hits, and in a way, it's like an addiction, but that's for another day. Now, talking about relationships, I should also bring up a great theory about love by Robert Sternberg. It's called the triangular theory of love. In this theory, love is made up of 3 parts: intimacy, passion, and commitment. So, intimacy, that's the feeling of closeness and familiarity we have with the other person. Think of your parents, siblings, and friends. If you really love them, it's usually because of this component, intimacy. Then we have passion. This is the strong feeling and desires that lead people into physical attraction, romance, and sexual relationships. This is also what makes romantic partners, and, well, hopefully not in the relationships that you have with, your parents and siblings. And last, we've got commitments. That's the conscious decision to stay with the other person and maintain that relationship. Each of these can form the corners of a triangle, and that's what makes the triangular theory of love. When you only have passion in the relationship, you have infatuation. Your feelings are so strong for the person, you might not even know them or haven't even built up a relationship with them. Think of it when you were young and had a crush on somebody. These usually don't last or go well unless you progress into a different form of relationship. Then, if you have intimacy, we call it liking. When you make a new friend where you don't have any sexual attraction or feelings of commitment to them, but you feel close to them, that's what liking is. Now, at the other corner, we have commitments only, and that makes empty love. You know those dull and boring marriages that lasted for, 20, 30 years, where the partners aren't really into each other anymore and they don't do anything together? They just stay together because maybe, they rely on each other financially, or out of commitments because they've already been together for who knows how long. That's what we call empty love. Now, when we start combining some of these components together, we start getting different forms of love. And yeah, so passion and intimacy together creates romantic love. It's usually what people feel a lot at the beginning of a romantic relationship. Those feelings where they feel attracted sexually or romantically to the other person, and they feel comfortable around them. It's kind of weird. I feel like this is usually what most girls go with at the beginning of a romantic relationship, where they don't feel that commitment until more intimacy is built. Now, compared to guys, my boys out there know what I mean. Boys and men are kind of weird. Maybe it's our raging hormones or something. But when we have high passion, we go all in with commitments already. Pretty unrealistic and problematic. But it's also what we, sometimes call thinking with our small brain downstairs. Yeah. Well, now talking about that high passion and strong commitments without any intimacy built, this is like having a big crush on somebody and we're ready to commit our lives to the other person without even having a proper relationship with them yet. Like I said, I think this is what happens to young men more. It's what we call fatuous love. Fatuous meaning foolish, silly, or pointless. How can you commit to somebody you're not familiar with? Without the intimacy part, it really is foolish to commit your life to another person. Then we have companionate love. Personally, I think this is a great sort of love to have with people who are close to you, like friends and family. It's realistic. You've built intimacy with these people through good chats, time together, and maybe, going through thick and thin together. Your BFFs, they probably fall under here. Now, the greatest form of relationship, if you're in a romantic relationship with somebody, would take all three of these components, intimacy, passion, and commitments, to create consummate love. Consummate meaning full, whole, or complete. You feel sexually attracted to the other person, or maybe even romantically. You feel comfortable and close with them, and you're ready to stick around through thick and thin. If you're in a relationship with your partner, what you strive, or what you should strive for, is this form of love, consummate love. Now, you might think that's all there is to this relationship theory, but there's actually more to this. So hold on to your horses. Just because you have all three of these, or two of these in, those non-romantic relationships, it doesn't mean things will necessarily work out fine. We also need to match our intimacy, passion, and commitments to that of our partners, or even to our or their expectations of it. Right, let's kind of look at these components, that's intimacy, compassion, and commitments, as sides of the triangles instead of the corners. So again, one side of the triangle represents either intimacy, passion, or commitments. How long each of these sides are indicates how high or low you are in each of these components. And because of this, you have different shaped triangles. And yours might be different from your partner's. You have your own triangle and your partner has their own representing their expectations from you. And when there's a mismatch in your triangle, it doesn't overlap well, that's where the problems arise. Let's look at Jace and Carol's example. Carol was high in passion, she was moderate in intimacy, and maybe high in commitments, okay, let's say. But Jace was lower in passion, high in intimacy, and high in commitments too. But because there's a difference in their level of passion and intimacy, we can see that there's a big mismatch in their behaviors and expectations for each other. This creates tension unless they resolve it properly through good communication of what they want from the other, and a willingness to change their behavior that reflects that discussion. Now, it's a great way to see how your relationship is going so far and what your partner is expecting of you. Sometimes that conversation is hard, or you don't know where to start first in that sort of conversation. And that's why you can use this sort of theory to figure out where you're at and what your partner expects. You can do this with anybody, even if they're not your romantic partner. Now, mentioning intimacy and passion, there's also something pretty important in relationship psychology about these two components. You see, passion early in romantic relationships might start off high, but it tends to decrease over time. It's because these are usually caused by those neurochemicals in our brain that make us feel good and excited around the other person. But remember about sensory adaptation? Well, our brains will desensitize ourselves to those over time, and we become less, overly excited about the other person. It doesn't mean that you're not attracted to the other person anymore, but you're just not over the moon about them anymore. Think of that honeymoon phase. After the honeymoon phase, couples tend to be less happy with each other because their passion for each other usually dies down by then. And when we're constantly bombarded with romantic fantasies from TV, movies, and pop music, it can really give us that unrealistic expectation about relationships. Relationships don't tend to maintain high passion over a long period of time. It can also be very taxing if it happens over a long time too. Now, intimacy, that's a different story. You don't start off with high intimacy, but instead it's actually built over time with the other person. When you weather through hardships together and do fun activities together, you chat and get into those deep talks, that can really build intimacy. In long-term, healthy, and good relationships, intimacy is what makes these relationships last. It's what makes us more comfortable around the other person. It builds familiarity and a feeling like we're a part of their family. So, how's the relationship with those you love? This could be a romantic partner, friends, or family. Well, I do hope things are going well, but if there's any takeaway you want from this lesson today, it's this. The components that create relationships is passion, intimacy, and commitments. We want a triangle that matches in shape as closely as we can with the expectations of our partner. And remember that intimacy is built over time and creates lasting relationships. Passion, on the other hand, fades, so don't fret over it if your partner isn't as romantic as he or she was at the beginning of the relationship. And well, with that said, that's the end of the episode. I hope you've liked this episode and found it helpful. Make sure you tune in every Tuesday morning. Throw me a comment, give me a like if you're on YouTube, or follow or subscribe to the podcast. And if this message really resonates with you, please do share it with somebody else. Anyways, I really do appreciate you listening to me until the end. If you want to contact me or appear on this podcast, you can contact me at DY Sensei at dysstudios.com. That's DY Sensei at dysstudios.com. With that said, class dismissed.